Did you know that behind every great move of God was a man who first said yes in private? Before the miracles, before the victories, before the stories we celebrate, there was a struggle, a moment of doubt, and a decision of faith. Today, we dive into the untold struggles and powerful choices of some of the greatest men of faith in the Bible. Let's discover what made them stand out and how their stories still speak to us today.
4. Abraham, revered as the father of faith. But before the legacy, before the covenant, before the nations, he was just a man with a choice. He lived in Ur of the Chaldeans, a prosperous city rooted in idol worship. He had land, family, status, comfort. And then God spoke, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you." No map, no details, no guarantees, just a command and a promise. Most people would hesitate, question, ask for proof, but Abraham believed the voice of the invisible God more than the certainty of what he could see. So he left. At 75 years old, he walked away from everything familiar, not because it was logical, but because he trusted the one who called him. That's faith. Faith is not just belief, it's obedience. It's trusting a God you cannot see to lead you to a future you cannot yet understand. But faith is never a straight road. Abraham waited and waited and waited. God had promised a son, an heir, a legacy. But years passed, and nothing. His body aged. Sarah's womb remained closed. Hope seemed distant, even impossible, and still, he believed. Against all hope, Abraham in hope believed. Romans 4:18. He held on when logic said let go. He trusted when circumstances screamed otherwise. He walked in faith when it would have been easier to sit in doubt. And then, the promise came. Isaac, laughter, a miracle in human form, a living testimony that faith in God is never in vain. Abraham saw what only faith could produce, a child born from a barren womb, a lineage born from obedience, a covenant written in the stars. "I will make you into a great nation," God had said, "and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." And God did exactly that. From Isaac came Jacob. From Jacob, 12 tribes. And from that nation came the Messiah, Jesus Christ, through whom all nations are blessed. Abraham didn't live a life without struggle, but he lived a life directed by trust. His faith was tested, stretched, and refined, but it was never wasted. And through him, God showed us, when we walk by faith, even when the path is uncertain, God writes a story far greater than we could ever imagine. Your faith might feel small right now. Your promise may feel delayed. But like Abraham, if you walk forward in obedience, you'll discover that God's promises may take time, but they never fail. The second person, Moses, God's chosen deliverer, the man who split the Red Sea and stood face to face with Pharaoh. But long before he became a legend, he was just a man running from his past. He grew up in Pharaoh's palace, raised as royalty, while his Hebrew brothers suffered in slavery. One moment of anger, one fatal mistake, and Moses fled Egypt, exiled into the wilderness. For 40 years, he became a forgotten shepherd, far from power, far from purpose, until one day, God spoke. From a burning bush that would not burn out, the voice of the Lord called out, "Moses, Moses, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of Egypt." But Moses didn't respond with boldness. He responded with fear. "Who am I that I should go? What if they don't believe me? I'm not good with words. Lord, please send someone else." This wasn't confidence. This wasn't courage. This was insecurity, wrapped in hesitation. A man haunted by failure, now asked to confront the greatest empire on earth. But here's the beauty of Moses' story. God didn't choose him because he was fearless. He chose him because he would depend completely on him. Moses didn't feel ready, but God was. Moses didn't have the words, but God gave him a voice. Moses didn't carry power, but he carried obedience. And when Moses finally said yes, God did the impossible. 10 plagues shook Egypt to its core. The mighty Red Sea bowed to God's command. An entire nation, millions of slaves, walked into freedom because one man chose faith over fear. And through the wilderness, Moses kept walking, not because the journey was easy, but because he trusted the one leading him. He saw miracles, yes, but he also faced complaints, betrayal, exhaustion. Yet he pressed on, knowing that the God who called him was faithful. Though he did not enter the promised land himself, Moses died knowing his faith had not been in vain. He led a generation out of bondage and toward destiny. He became a friend of God, a prophet like no other. And his life reminds us that faith isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing obedience in spite of it. Moses proves that your past doesn't disqualify you. Your weakness doesn't disqualify you. Even your doubts don't disqualify you. What matters is this: when God calls, will you trust him? You may feel unqualified, afraid, or forgotten. But if you respond in faith like Moses did, God will use your life to deliver more than just yourself. He will set others free through your obedience.
Next is David, Israel's greatest king, a warrior, a worshiper, a man after God's own heart. But before he wore the crown, before the songs of victory, before he faced Goliath, he was just a boy in the field, unseen, uninvited, uncelebrated. While his brothers trained as warriors, David tended sheep, day after day, alone. Just him, the sheep, and his God. But here's the secret. The field was not a place of delay. It was a place of preparation. Because it was there, when no one was watching, that David learned to trust God. He fought lions and bears with a sling and a prayer. He sang psalms in the dark, not to perform, but to worship. He built a relationship with God in the silence. So when the noise of battle came, he was already ready. One day, God sent the prophet Samuel to anoint the next king. Jesse lined up all his sons, except David. Even his father didn't think he was king material. But God did. Because while man looks at the outward appearance, God looks at the heart. And when David heard the taunts of Goliath on the battlefield, he didn't see a giant too big to fight. He saw a threat too bold to ignore. "You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin," David said. "But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts." That was faith, not in weapons, not in armor, but in the living God who had never failed him in the field. And with one smooth stone and a lifetime of hidden trust, David brought down the giant. But David's story didn't end with a single victory. He was hunted by King Saul, lived in caves, faced betrayal, isolation, and heartbreak. Yet through it all, he never stopped trusting God's plan. Even when he had the chance to take the throne by force, he waited for God's timing. That's real faith, not just fighting giants, but trusting God when it looks like the promise has been delayed. And in due time, God raised him up. David became king. He unified Israel. He established Jerusalem as the holy city. And more than that, God made a covenant with him. Your throne shall be established forever. A promise that would find its ultimate fulfillment in Jesus Christ, the Son of David. David's life teaches us that God sees what others overlook, that hidden faith in the field matters just as much as public victories. You may feel forgotten. You may be fighting private battles no one else sees. But just like David, if you remain faithful in the secret place, God will reward you in the open. Because true greatness in the kingdom isn't built on platforms, it's built on trust.
The fourth person, Paul, the unstoppable apostle, the man who wrote much of the New Testament, who carried the gospel across continents, who endured beatings, prisons, shipwrecks, and snake bites, and kept preaching. But before he became Paul,
he was Saul, a Pharisee, a scholar, a fierce defender of the law, and a violent enemy of the early church. He didn't just disagree with Christians, he hunted them down. He believed he was serving God, but he was blind, physically and spiritually, until one moment changed everything. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Who are you, Lord? I am Jesus, the one you are persecuting. And just like that, the proud persecutor was humbled, blinded by glory, led by the hand, left to sit in silence for 3 days. Sometimes God has to shut down everything around us so we can finally hear him clearly. When Saul's eyes were opened again, he didn't just receive sight, he received purpose. He was baptized, filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to preach the very gospel he once tried to destroy. That's the power of transformational faith. And from that moment forward, Saul became Paul, a new man with a new mission. He traveled from city to city, not with armies or political influence, but with a message: Jesus Christ and him crucified. He faced stoning, beatings, shipwrecks, imprisonment, and still he said, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Romans 8:18. He was misunderstood, abandoned, and ultimately martyred. But he finished his race with joy. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Paul's life reminds us, faith is not just about believing, it's about becoming. Becoming who God intended you to be, no matter your past, no matter your failures. If God could take a murderer and make him a messenger, then there's no limit to what he can do with a heart surrendered in faith. From Abraham to Moses, from David to Paul, each man walked a different path, faced different trials, but they all shared one thing in common: faith. Not a perfect faith, not a pain-free faith, but a persistent, obedient, trusting faith. And just like them, your story is still being written. You may be in the waiting, like Abraham, in the wilderness, like Moses, in the shadows, like David, or in the middle of transformation, like Paul. Wherever you are, God sees, God speaks. And if you'll trust him, he will lead you to your destiny. Because faith doesn't just change your direction, it changes everything. If this inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. And let me know in the comments, which man of faith speaks most to your journey right now, and why? Until next time, keep the faith and walk boldly with God.